The CIA tried to train cats as spies. During the Cold War, the line between science fiction and national security got blurry. Governments chased any idea that might offer an edge, no matter how strange. Out of that atmosphere came one of the most unlikely intelligence projects ever funded by the United States. A plan to turn cats into covert listening devices. Yes, cats. The program was called Operation Acoustic Kitty, and it was run by the Central Intelligence Agency. The idea was simple in theory and wildly complicated in reality. If a cat could be outfitted with a microphone and transmitter, it could wander near unsuspecting targets, especially Soviet officials, and secretly record conversations. No one would suspect a cat. That was the pitch. What followed was years of research, millions of dollars in spending, invasive surgery, and a lesson in why animals are not machines. The project is remembered today not because it succeeded, but because it failed in a way so absurd that it feels like a punchline. According to CIA lore, the first field test ended when the cat wandered into traffic and was hit by a car. That single moment came to symbolize the entire operation. But the real story is longer, stranger, and more revealing about how intelligence agencies think when pressure is high and oversight is low. Why anyone thought this was a good idea. To understand why someone greenlit a cat spy program, you have to understand the Cold War mindset. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a global contest defined by secrecy. Intelligence gathering mattered enormously. A single overheard conversation could reveal military plans, diplomatic intentions, or technological breakthroughs. Human spies were risky. They could defect, be captured, or be killed. Electronic surveillance was improving, but bugs needed to be planted, and that required access. Cameras were bulky, microphones were limited by battery life and transmission range. Animals on paper solved several problems at once. Birds, dogs, dolphins, and even insects were studied for possible military use. A cat in particular had unique advantages. Cats move quietly, they roam freely, they draw little attention. A cat sitting near a park bench or windowsill looks like background noise, not a threat. Someone inside the CIA asked a dangerous question. What if we could listen through one? The birth of Operation Acoustic Kitty. Operation Acoustic Kitty began around 1961, during a period when the CIA was investing heavily in experimental technology. This was the same era that produced poison darts disguised as pens and cameras hidden in coat buttons. The goal of the program was not vague research, it was specific. Engineers wanted to implant a microphone in the cat's ear canal, a transmitter near the base of the skull, and a battery in the chest cavity. An antenna would run through the tail, disguised as fur. The cat would then be trained to walk toward specific locations, sit nearby, and transmit audio back to a receiver. According to later CIA documents, the surgery was complex but successful. The cat survived the procedures. The electronics worked. From a purely technical standpoint, the project cleared its first hurdle. What the engineers underestimated was the cat, training the world's least obedient operative. Cats are not dogs. They do not reliably follow commands. They are motivated by hunger, comfort, curiosity, and sometimes nothing at all. CIA trainers reportedly spent months trying to condition the cat to move toward audio cues or visual markers. Food rewards were used, so were gentle punishments. At one point, scientists considered whether hunger could be suppressed surgically so the cat would not wander off in search of food during a mission. That detail alone says a lot about how far the project had drifted from common sense. The problem wasn't that the cat couldn't hear commands or understand conditioning. The problem was that real-world environments are chaotic. Loud noises, sudden movements, other animals, and traffic all competed for the cat's attention. The moment the cat was outside a controlled setting, its behavior became unpredictable. Still, after years of work and an estimated cost of several $1 million, the CIA decided it was time for a live test. The first mission and the infamous ending. The test scenario was modest. The cat would be released near a park bench where two men were talking. The men were reportedly foreign officials, possibly Soviet. The goal was simply to see whether the cat could approach them and transmit usable audio. As the story goes, the cat was released from a van across the street. Almost immediately, it wandered into traffic and was struck by a taxi. Whether every detail of that account is perfectly accurate has been debated. Some later sources suggest the test failed for other reasons, such as interference or loss of signal. But the CIA itself eventually acknowledged that the project was impractical, and the traffic story appears in internal histories and memoirs. In 1967, Operation Acoustic Kitty was officially canceled. The conclusion was blunt. Cats could not be trained to reliably perform intelligence tasks in uncontrolled environments. The documents that made it public. For years, the cat spy story circulated as rumor. It sounded too ridiculous to be true. Then in the early 2000s, declassified CIA documents confirmed that the program existed. One internal memo summarized the issue with understated bureaucracy. It noted that while the equipment worked, the animal could not be trained to move in a predictable manner. That sentence may be the most expensive understatement in intelligence history. The documents revealed not just technical failures, but a deeper flaw. The project was driven by engineering optimism rather than behavioral reality. The scientists assumed that if something could be built, it could be controlled. Cats disagreed. Why this wasn't as crazy as it sounds. From today's perspective, Operation Acoustic Kitty feels like a joke. But within its historical context, it makes more sense. The Cold War rewarded creativity and punished hesitation. Intelligence agencies were encouraged to explore unconventional ideas. Many strange projects did produce useful results. Satellite surveillance, for example, once sounded just as far-fetched. The problem wasn't imagination, it was arrogance. The CIA assumed it could override millions of years of animal behavior with technology and conditioning. That assumption shows up repeatedly in military research, from early attempts at mind control to overly optimistic weapons systems. Acoustic Kitty failed because it ignored a simple truth. Living beings are not tools. They have agency, instincts, and limits. Ethical questions that still matter. Even in the 1960s, some researchers expressed discomfort with the project. The surgeries were invasive. The animal had no choice. The risk to the cat's life was obvious. Today, such a project would face intense ethical scrutiny. Animal research laws are stricter. Public opinion is less forgiving. Intelligence agencies still operate in secrecy, but they are not as free to experiment without oversight as they once were. Operation Acoustic Kitty serves as an early example of why ethical boundaries matter. When a project becomes absurd or cruel, it often signals deeper problems in decision-making. The legacy of a failed spy cat operation. Acoustic Kitty did not lead to a breakthrough in surveillance, but it did leave behind lessons that continue to resonate. First, technology cannot replace judgment. Just because something is possible does not mean it is practical or wise. Second, secrecy can enable bad ideas. Without external review, even intelligent people can talk themselves into nonsense. Third, failure matters. The CIA quietly shelved the project and moved on. It did not publicly admit the mistake until decades later. In that silence, the story became legend. Today, Acoustic Kitty is often cited alongside other Cold War oddities as proof that intelligence agencies are run by humans, not masterminds. They experiment, they miscalculate, sometimes they get hit by a taxi. Why we still talk about it? The image of a cat as a spy sticks in the mind because it is absurd and oddly human. It captures a moment when fear, ambition, and imagination collided. It also reminds us that power does not guarantee wisdom. The same organization capable of complex global operations once believed it could wire a cat and point it like a microphone. That doesn't make the CIA uniquely foolish. It makes it familiar. In a world still obsessed with surveillance, data collection, and technological shortcuts, Operation Acoustic Kitty feels less like ancient history and more like a warning. When innovation outruns reality, the results can be embarrassing at best and tragic at worst. And sometimes they involve a very confused cat walking into traffic.